What's up everyone, it's Victon. I have been trying to come up with some builds for the in-game content after this patch, and I think I finally have a winner. It took a little bit to come up with one. I think the patch definitely had some big old nerfs in there, some buffs, but a whole lot of nerfs, and I don't think they ever meant for people to be farming 187 content this fast, especially with that bleeding edge bug. And now the trial being extremely overpowered and overused. So what I did was I've specifically avoided using the trial belt or the crit chance freeze chest. I know most people won't have those items, and since they are seriously overpowered and need nerfs, I'm going to go ahead and leave them out of this build. Obviously, if you do want to equip them, feel free to go ahead, and it's going to probably half your clear time for all of these runs that you're doing. I actually don't think I've seen another build clear 187 that isn't running the trial belt since the patch dropped. Maybe there is some out there, but I personally haven't seen them yet. Now this build definitely can do 187s, but it is a 10-minute run, so I just suggest farming low 160s since you actually get the same gear from them. It does about maybe a 5 to 6 minute run without the trial belt in the 160s, and obviously if you do equip the trial belt, like I said, it's going to half your time, so probably about 4 minutes for the 160s if you have the trial belt. Alright, so like I always do, let's go ahead and throw up some gameplay while we start up the guide. Okay, so let's first chat about skills and these skill passives that you're going to be using. So the main abilities here are going to be Anomaly and Bleeding Edge. Basically what we're going to be doing is using Anomaly to pull in a gazillion health globes. So many health globes that, as you can probably already see in the video, it's lagging the hell out of my computer, and I have a pretty decent computer, so just be aware. You might actually want to turn off your damage numbers. That does help quite a bit. So Anomaly, we want to be getting the passive on Anomaly first, that actually ups the chance for health globes to spawn. After that, you want to be making sure that we are pulling id mobs with Anomaly and we can cast it twice. The second biggest piece about this build is the Sovereign Shout. So once we're using a shout, it's actually going to give us a 6% additional chance to spawn health globes. That on top of the passive that we have on the skill tree, which we'll see in a second, it gives you an additional 4%. So that's a total of 10% chance to spawn a health globe. And basically the way that works is anytime a mob is hit, they have a 10% chance to spawn a health globe. And what we're using to proc that chance is Anomaly, obviously, and also Solar Fall. Solar Fall, we're going to be wanting to get the tick rate chance is our number one, because the faster it ticks, the more it's going to be able to spawn those health globes, and it does a decent amount of damage itself as well. After that, the reason that this is a hybrid build is we're actually going to be using Bleeding Edge as well. It did get nerfed, but it still does a pretty good amount of damage. We're going to be wanting to get the skill passive that makes it scale the damage based off of how many ailments we have. And with this build, we actually are able to get a full set of 6 stacks of ailments, so you're doing a pretty good amount of damage with Bleeding Edge as well. And it's just kind of on top of the insanity that is the health globes popping and exploding. So we're also going to be using the Mark of Impurity. So that's essentially our attempt at using the trial belt, but it's manually, so everybody can do it. The only requirement there is obviously you have to have a dagger. So get that dagger and we can use Mark of Impurity. Now the reason that we want to use Mark of Impurity, especially in the higher end tier maps, I wouldn't necessarily say it's very important in the lower tier, but anything past 150, 160, you definitely need to have Mark of Impurity. The biggest skill passive there that we want is the passive that makes enemies explode in an AoE once they die. So essentially you have a high HP mob that you have put this on, and once it dies, it explodes, dealing a percentage of their maximum HP. And there's also a skill passive that once an enemy dies, it can spread the Mark of Impurity to around it. So it's like a chain reaction. And it's a whole lot of damage. The reason it's a whole lot of damage is because it's scaling off of that monster's maximum HP. So the higher level zone you're doing, 187 in this case, they have a whole lot of HP. So it works really well when you're doing Untainteds and you're able to get one of the Untainteds next to the boss, or even a blue or a rare next to the boss, and you kill that, and it does a ton of damage next to the boss. Some of the times, if you're able to get a couple of those big boy mobs next to the boss, you can 1 or 2 shot the boss. It's pretty rare, it's hard to get those mobs next to the boss, but it does happen. So lastly, we're actually using Aether Jump. Nothing too fancy here, it's really just to kind of move around and get around the map. Alright, now that we've talked about skills, let's go ahead and talk about the gear. Good thing to note here is I actually don't have the best gear. A lot of the stats that I have are relatively decent for my build, but the rolls are kind of lower, so there's actually quite a bit of improvement. I think what I'm seeing here as far as damage numbers is about 75% of the potential of what I could be doing. So maybe shaving off a minute and a half from the clear times here if I had a better set of gear. So off of the weapon here, I have all the right stats, just not really high rolls. So you make sure you want to get flat physical rolls and flat rend rolls and flat toxic. So making sure we're getting the flat material damage. You obviously want 3, but that's pretty rough to get. So at least get your 2 flat rolls. We definitely want material ailment chance score. That's what I'm going for in my build. It is scaling material ailment chance. So I have quite a bit of that, and we do quite a bit of crit as well, so getting some crit damage is pretty good. It's not as good as it was before this patch, but it definitely still does help. I also have some leech on there. Leech is absolutely huge for this build. You'll see in the gameplay behind here, my health goes down to like 10%, a whole lot, and because I leech so much from both my weapon, and you can see from my catalyst I have leech on there as well, my health just goes from 10% to 100% almost instantly all the time, and it's really helpful for defense. So the catalyst there, we're just going for flat spell damage, not a huge deal, but making sure that we're getting all of our ailments is a big deal. So just go through all your abilities and make sure that you have the right amount of flat spell damage on your catalyst based off of what ailment you need to be stacking on the mobs. And like I said earlier, we can actually get a full set of 6 stacks for ailments, and that just amplifies our damage even more. So and that comes pretty much solely from your catalyst here. So outside of that, all the other gear pieces were mainly going to be focusing on defenses. Defenses are huge in the in-game, so 160 plus. You absolutely have to have, in my opinion, an all-resist chest with the node that doubles your all-resistance score from your chest, and then the one behind that node that doubles your all-resistance score for your helmet. I would absolutely suggest you get those. That's almost a mandatory node and a mandatory piece of gear. And you'll see that here on my gear as well. For defense, I'm going max HP. In my build, I have about 80,000. I think with better gear, I'll probably get up to 90 to 100,000. All res, like I mentioned, is extremely important, and actually dodge chance is pretty solid as well. And you'll start getting those probably 150s, 160s. You'll start getting a lot higher dodge rolls on your gear. That's definitely not even a second degree. I would say that's a third stat that you want, but it's still pretty huge, and it can actually go quite a long way. As far as utility, this is huge. You absolutely want cooldown reduction on all of your gear pieces. So that means your helmet, your chest, and your legs. And the reason we're getting cooldown reduction is for your Anomaly and your Solar Fall. We want to be casting those as much as possible. And again, that's just so that we can get all these health globes out and they can explode as much as possible. So cooldown reduction is definitely huge. After that, we want transfer time decrease between willpower and rage, just so it's a little bit smoother between casting your spells and your attack damage. For me, I like running 2 willpower potions because I do a lot of spamming with Bleeding Edge, and then getting back to my spells with those willpower potions is actually pretty smooth, I think. And we also want, again, pretty huge for utility on our shoulders and our gloves. we're going to want rage and willpower cost decrease. It's actually pretty huge, so that we spam our skills so much, both spells and bleeding edge. Getting those and high rolls as well on those pieces is pretty huge, because we want to be able to spam as absolute much as possible. As far as your stat priority, when you're putting your stats in your build here, you want about probably 80% toughness and about 20% ferocity. I actually only have about 35-36% critical strike chance, and it does just fine. I think the biggest thing is you want to be alive. If you're dead, you're doing 0 damage, and we definitely need, at an absolute minimum, I would say 80k life if you're doing the 160 pluses. So toughness 80%, ferocity 20%. The same goes for gear. Obviously, if you can get a ferocity on gear, that's fantastic. If you can get toughness on gear, that's fantastic. But I would say that's secondary compared to, for example, getting the utility, cooldown reduction, raids cost reduction, things like that. It's definitely going to be secondary. And like I mentioned earlier, I personally am not using these in my build for the purpose of making this guide, but if you do have either of these two items, it's very beneficial to go ahead and use them in your build, especially the trial. It's definitely the most overpowered unique in this game right now. The reason being 100% chance to inflict Mark of Impurity to an enemy when they're hit. So essentially, it's completely free. You don't have to use a dagger anymore. You can use any weapon you want. And it's automatically applied to all enemies. So basically they're exploding for that percentage of maximum HP 100% of the time, whereas sometimes it's kind of hard to do it if you're manually casting Mark of Impurity. So it's just an absolutely insane unique. If you have it, use it. If you don't worry, this build can absolutely still clear 187 content, no problem. Now the chest over there, basically what it does, why it's important, is it gives your freeze chance, actually it converts it to critical strike chance. So you actually don't need to go for example, ferocity. We don't need to go for critical strike chance. All it is your freeze chance. So it's immediately converted straight into critical strike chance. So pretty much with very little investment, you'll probably have around 30 to 40% critical strike chance just from that chest alone, without even having to invest in critical strike chance or ferocity. So pretty big piece. The only issue that I have with that piece, and I don't use that, is because you're losing out on that all res chest piece, where you're getting that double all res from the node in the skill tree. So you're losing out on a whole bunch of survivability. It gives you some more damage, but you lose out on a ton of survivability. I would only really use this if you feel like you're not dying a lot. You take off the chest, you try this, and it seems pretty comfortable. But I personally have tried it, and I didn't really like it that much. I know a whole bunch of other people use it, but I personally just prefer to be alive longer. If you're dead, you're doing 0 DPS. Okay, now gems. Gems are pretty straightforward here. So with the weapon, we're going to want 3 offensive 1s, and we want flat material damage. I went for Rend in my case because I want to be scaling bleed. On my catalyst, I actually have bleed damage % increase. So going Rend is pretty big for me, but even if you don't have that on your catalyst, I would probably go ahead and say go with bleed. After that, rings, amulet, and belt. I would definitely say it's very important to go ahead and get transfer time decreased between willpower and a rage, and you want that on all 3 of those pieces, and even on your catalyst as well if you can get 1 or 2. In my case, I have 2 of these in my catalyst, and I have 1 block chance % gem in my catalyst. So going over to chest, pants, and helm, I do have block chance. I split it about half and half between block chance and health. Now my build that I have right now, it has 50% block chance, and it's got about 25% block chance efficiency. So it's nothing huge. There's a whole bunch of builds out there that have 100% block chance, but we can't get that unless you're having a shield and you're really investing your gem points, your gem slots into block chance. But I felt that having more HP is going a little bit longer than having the block chance, so that's why I split it half and half. Okay, so the skill tree. What we're going to do here is actually pretty common, I think, for a lot of different builds. You're going to be seeing this quite often. There's actually not as much build diversity as you would think with Wolcen. Sadly, I'm sure they'll improve upon it in the future, but sadly right now there's really just only a couple lines that you can go. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to go first and get this for a little bit more crit chance. And just a note here, what if you're leveling up as you do this build, I'm going to go in the order of what you should take first. So first, like I said, we're going to get this critical strike chance here. We're going to go up here, and the next thing we're going to get is ailment chance score. So again, we want to be laying a whole bunch of ailments down as fast as possible and as many stacks as possible, because that's going to scale our damage quite a bit. So after that, I go up here and I get this little guy right here. So again, we want to be stacking ailments as fast as possible. So +2 ailment stacks inflicted. Over here, this is a big note here. So again, the more ailment stacks that you have on a mob, the more, not on a mob, but that you have gained, the more damage that you're doing. And you'll notice this on the bottom of your screen, right above your HP bar. It'll be 6 different icons, all for your different ailment types. And that is amplifying your damage on a % basis. So after that, we're going to be going up here and we're going to be getting this. So 1 additional ailments. From there, we're going to be going over here and getting this. So critical hits can now happen on ailments. So again, we don't have an insane amount of crit. We've only got 30 to 40% depending on your build and what you have, but it's still pretty big. Now your ailments can actually crit. And like I said, we're doing a whole bunch of bleed. We're doing a whole bunch of toxic. We're actually doing a whole bunch of fire, so burn as well. So all of that is pretty huge when you're able to crit off of that. Next, I would go over here, and we're doubling the chance that you are going to be applying ailment stacks. From there, I would go up here, and I would get this guy right here. So this is a massive damage node increase. You'll see this pretty much in almost every single build. Basically, if an enemy is inflicted with stasis, and the way that we're inflicting stasis is by Anomaly, then after 1.5 seconds, all damage that they took in that 1.5 seconds is doubled. So basically, it's just a double damage 100% of the time. It's an insane node. Very good. I have heard that it might be bugged right now. I'm not 100% sure how it's bugged. I have heard that maybe the damage that is happening after the delay can't crit. I'm not sure if that's the bugged piece or if there's something else, but I do notice that it increases my damage by a bunch, so I would go ahead and take it anyway. After that, these nodes you'll see right here are pretty important. These two, so these 5 maximum ailment stacks. Like I said, we want to be stacking as many ailments as possible, so those are pretty big. Right here is just a nice little defense for mid-game if you are leveling it as you go. A pretty good defensive for the middle of the road here. After that, we're going to start moving down here. We're going to grab this just for some global life leech. Not a huge deal. Like I said, if you actually have life leech on both your weapon or life leech for your attack damage for bleeding edge, and then if you have life leech on your catalyst for your spells, you probably don't need this node, but I have it anyway because, like I said, I really like the life leech in general. It saves me quite a bit, just because I don't have as much block chance as some other builds. I have a good amount of HP, and with a whole lot of leech, it just goes up to 100% almost instantly. So from there, we're going to want to go up here, and basically this is giving us extra damage for all the curses that we have on an enemy, so pretty huge. From there, we're going to want to go down here, and this is an interesting one. I'm not 100% sure if everything is working as intended, not in a bugged way where it's improving our damage by a lot. I think it's, if anything, not doing anything. I still would get it because I can tell a difference in some scenarios. For example, the move speed, I definitely notice, and I think that the all resistance works as well. I'm just not 100% sure on the other stuff, but I think this is a pretty good overall damage and utility node, so I go ahead and take it. From there, we're going to go back up to here, and we're going to come down this way. We're going to grab this right here, and that's where you can really start going with your health globe explosions. So that's probably around maybe late 50s. to early 60s is when you're going to be able to pick this up. I would say before that, don't even worry about getting this. Just doing normal ailment stacking is probably going to carry you through the story. But once you get an end game, you definitely want to be grabbing this for the health globe explosions. Right here is that node that I mentioned where you can get an additional chance to spawn health globes. So that's a 10% chance alongside your shout to spawn health globes. After that, we're going to grab this. It's just a little bit extra block. Like I said, we only have about 50% in this build, which is why we're going with so much leech. But it's a good node. It's only 1 point and it's 6% block chance. After that, this is going to be one of your biggest damage nodes for sure. It's like I mentioned with the gear. We want the all resistance chest. The reason we want that is because it's going to be doubling your all resistance and it makes you incredibly tanky. If you're running with a life piece chest and you switch to this, you instantly notice the difference, and it is incredible how much of a defensive buff this will give you. The node right behind that is this. Basically it's the same type of concept, but it's for your helmet, so you definitely want to go with an all resist helmet as well to maximize your all resistance on your gear for that extra bit of tankiness. And that is it for the skill tree. Like I said, pretty basic, and a whole lot of builds do a whole lot of the same things. But basically what I've done with this build is I've kind of put everything that works for different builds into this one build, and it seems to work pretty well. And like I said, I'm thinking that this is potentially the only build out there that can run a 187 that is not reliant on the trial belt. So, and that is pretty much it for the skill tree. Like I said, nothing too crazy here. A lot of the builds that you're going to see out there do a lot of the same stuff here. What I've done is I've just kind of tried to incorporate everything from a whole bunch of different builds that really shine for that particular build, and I've made it into this one single build. The biggest thing there being the ailment stacking with Anomaly. A whole lot of builds use that. And then the health globe piece, which is a newer thing that I think not a lot of people have been trying. And then obviously the bleeding edge, which is a meme at this point, but it still does quite a bit of damage. So mixing all that together, it actually has a pretty good result, and I'm able to do 187s, like I said, without the trial belt. So it's working for me for sure. And that pretty much sums it up, guys. This is actually a pretty fun build to play, as long as your screen and your computer is not literally on fire from lag. It's pretty fun. It does a whole lot of damage, and like I said, I think it's probably one of the only builds that can run a 187 right now without the trial belt. So hopefully it does work for you guys. My gear's not the craziest, so I feel like you guys can probably pull it off as long as you're getting the right stats on your gear. If you guys have any questions or comments, concerns, definitely leave them in the comments, and I'll try my best to respond to them and help you guys out. This is a newer channel, so any like, comment, and subscribe actually goes a pretty long way, and I definitely appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one.